Good afternoon. Today we're going to conduct the concluding lesson, the concluding session of the Independence mini module. And I want to begin by reconnecting this lesson to the last 2 weeks, because this lesson only lands properly if it feels cumulative to you. So if you're jumping in now, understand that it's tied to the last 2 weeks. The lesson today is tied to the last 2 weeks. On June 22nd, we presented a core realization like this. Independence is not the absence of constraints. Independence is the ability to consciously choose which constraints govern your life and govern your business or your nonprofit. And then on June 29th, we pushed that idea a little bit further. We said healthy independence is governed interdependence. Okay. So on June 22nd, we said independence is not the absence of constraints, it's the ability to consciously choose which constraints govern your life, which constraints govern your business. And on the 29th, we pushed the idea, we expanded it. We said healthy independence is actually governed interdependence. And from there, we recognized several things. Doing everything by yourself often will create fragility because it's dependent upon overfunctioning, which can masquerade as independence. Some dependencies strengthen agency, while other dependencies quietly replace agency. And solo does not mean structurally alone. It might mean operationally alone, but with structural support. So that leads us to the next question very naturally. If healthy interdependence requires chosen constraints and governed interdependence, what will actually preserve personal freedom, personal agency over time? And I'm proposing that the answer is systems, which is why the lesson title for today is Freedom Comes from System, Not from Hustle. Freedom comes from systems, not from hustle culture. And the more precise version is systems will preserve your agency by reducing dependence on memory, improvisation, and emergency effort. That's what we're going to explore today. Not software demos, not automation tactics, not time blocking, not even generic productivity advice. This is a structural lesson, a lesson about what kind of businesses can actually remain free over time. Because here's the distinction. A business that only works when the owner is continuously rescuing it is not free. It is dependent upon that hustle. So we're going to begin with the misunderstanding. Many operators, solo operators in particular, freelancers, will believe that freedom comes from working harder, learning faster, becoming more capable, being available to the customers all the time, becoming indispensable. And I certainly understand why. Because capability matters. Capabilities will create opportunities. Capability helps you respond. It helps you solve. It helps you adapt. It helps you rescue. It helps you survive. And that's why I want to be careful here. This lesson is not anti-competence. It is certainly not anti-effort, because effort is absolutely essential. And it is not dismissing hustle as though hustle doesn't matter. Many people got to the place of competence and confidence because hustle matters. Many people survived because their competence matters. Many businesses have stayed alive because the owner was capable enough to compensate for what the system could not yet carry. And we should respect the results of that effort. But we still need to say what competence alone cannot do. Competence can create opportunity. It can help you respond to the problem. It can help you get through a hard week. It can help you stabilize a client situation. It can help you rescue a workflow. But competence alone does not create durable freedom. That is the role of systems. When you look at this slide, the contrast is simple. The capability allows you to solve, adapt, rescue, survive. The systems allow you to stabilize, preserve, repeat, protect, and that becomes scalable. That is the distinction. Capability lets you respond with competence and with confidence and with consistency and coherence. Systems let you stop rescuing the problems and begin scaling the solutions. Because many people in this room are competent enough to keep weak systems alive for a very long time. And because you can do that, it is easy to confuse personal strength with structural freedom. But the two are not the same thing. So let me say this clearly. Capability creates opportunity. Systems create freedom. And we're going to define freedom more carefully in this case. Because this lesson will not land if freedom remains some vague emotional word. Freedom is not a feeling in the way we're using it today. And as we discussed last week, freedom is not independence, it is governed interdependence. Because none of us can do all of the things alone. Freedom is not just motion. It is not simply saying, I can move quickly because I'm not constrained by someone else's set of rules. It is not just, I'm not employed by someone else. It is not, I can choose my own hours. Freedom in a business context is an operating condition. That is what this slide is trying to show. On one side, you have motion, activity, pressure, personal effort, things getting done because someone is strong enough, fast enough, and committed enough to keep them moving. And on the other side, you have a business that can continue functioning because the operating structure is stable. So when I say freedom is preserved, not claimed, I mean this. Business is not free simply because the owner says it is. A business is not free simply because the owner works for themselves. A business is not free simply because someone is capable enough to keep it moving. A business becomes free when it can continue functioning without the constant rescue effort by the operator. That is why the point matters. Freedom is not just movement, it is the operating condition. And that's one of the biggest structural shifts in this whole mini module. Because if you keep treating freedom as a feeling or freedom as the right to choose, then you will keep overvaluing motion. You will keep overvaluing your choices. But if you begin treating freedom as an operating condition, then you'll begin asking a different question. What kind of structure is required for this business to remain functional without depending on my constant personal rescue? And that is where the systems come in. We can get to one of the most important truths of this lesson. Competence can hide fragility. This is where today's lesson ties directly back to last week's on June 29th. Last week we said overfunctioning can masquerade as independence. Today we're going to explain why that happens structurally. A capable operator can accomplish a lot. They can remember everything personally. They can manually adapt to every client experience. They can fill the gaps in the communication. They can rescue broken workflows. They can hold undocumented knowledge in their head. They can compensate for weak processes in real time. And because they can do those things, the business may appear more stable than it really is. That is what this image is showing. The structure is unstable, but it is still being held up. Why? Because one person is carrying it. That does not mean the system is strong. It means the operator is compensating because the operator is strong. A system that works only because you keep rescuing it is not stable. That is the diagnosis. Not you are weak because you are strong. Not you are doing it badly because you are very capable and competent. Not you should have known better because maybe you do, but you're in the hustle stage. You're in that life cycle of the feast or famine that has to happen. But here's the thing. Your competence may be hiding what the system still cannot do on its own. And this is why highly capable operators can stay trapped in the feast or famine stage longer than others who are less capable. Because your strength delays visibility of the problem. You can keep carrying it. You can keep rescuing it. You can keep compensating for it. You can keep making it look functional. And because the collapse is postponed, the fragility remains hidden. So competence is good, but competence can also conceal the degree to which a business depends on you as the emergency rescue system. And that is not freedom. That is you bound to the business because the entire system is inside your head. This is capability masking fragility. Now let's define more structurally what systems are. Not as software, not as tools, not as automations, not as business operations stuff or SOPs or processes or procedures. At the structural level, systems replace three kinds of dependence: memory, improvisation, and emergency effort. Memory dependence looks like this: remembering it, re-explaining it in different words, carrying it personally. That is the business depending on your mind as the storage unit. Your memory is the system, and it may be able to work for a while. But I can guarantee it does not scale very well. It does not transfer to another operator or team member well. And it does not preserve your freedom well. It ties you to being the memory system. Or we can look at improvisation. Improvisation dependence looks like making it up, customizing it, deciding under pressure. This is where every situation has to be reinterpreted live in the presence of the client. The next step is not visible. The response is not governed. The workflow is not settled. Every step depends on real-time adjustments. And sometimes it feels like flexibility, but it also increases noise, increases burden, increases inconsistency, and it results in your emotional, mental, and physical fatigue. Emergency effort dependence looks like this: rescuing it, fixing it, holding it together by pure force of will. This is the system that still works, but only because someone is always stepping in at the last possible moment. So we're going to contrast those improvisations or lack of systems, lack of governance, with what a system can create. A system creates documented, repeatable, visible, governed processes. That is the shift. A system is the structural alternative to overfunctioning as the individual. It does not remove your humanity. It does not remove your judgment. It does not remove your skill. It removes unnecessary dependence on your remembering everything, your reinventing everything, your rescuing everything. That is why systems preserve agency. They allow you to do the routine things routinely, freeing up mental, emotional, and physical capacity to solve the things that cannot be done routinely or systematically. These systems reduce the amount of your life that must be spent on preventable chaos. So now we're going to talk directly about hustle. And again, I want to be respectful here because hustle can be useful. Hustle can be necessary. Hustle can get something moving. Hustle can inject the energy necessary to gain traction. Hustle can help you survive a season. Hustle can help you get the project finished, get the message sent, get the client taken care of, get the invoice out, get the week over the finish line. And I'm not denying any of that. But hustle is not a sustainable operating system. That's the distinction. Hustle creates urgency, push, reaction, temporary movement. Systems create rhythm, process, consistency, reduced dependence on individual rescue. That is a different quality of your life in your business. So yes, hustle may create movement, but movement is not the same thing as freedom. If a business only moves because you keep pushing it manually, then the business is dependent on your energy in a way that limits your freedom. Hustle is often what gets you through the moment. Systems are what reduce the number of moments that require rescue in the first place. That is why the lesson is not anti-effort, it is anti-confusion. It is anti-structural dependent on repeated heroics. Effort creates movement. Systems create repeatability. That's the distinction. And repeatability is one of the essential conditions of durable freedom. So let's make this practical without turning it into a tactic sessions. When I say systems reduce dependent on heroics, I mean the business begins to depend less on your personal rescue behavior and more on visible, repeatable structure. That can include things like onboarding, SOPs, referral systems, follow-up systems, bookkeeping, a practice training environment, boundaries, scheduling rules. Now, the point here is not that these are a magic complete list or that any of these by themselves are the holy grail. The point is not the tool. The point is reducing your manual rescue effort. That is why this slide uses a clipboard instead of a software screenshot. Because the system can be simple. It can be low tech, it can be manual, it can be lightweight. If it reduces repeated rescue, it is moving in the right direction. It could be a CRM. It could be automation. It could be any of those things. But it doesn't need to be. It needs to be the system that works for you. An onboarding system will reduce the number of times you must personally clarify the same next step confusion. A referral system reduces dependence on one person just naturally knowing how to refer you. A follow-up system reduces the number of opportunities that disappear when you get busy. A bookkeeping system reduces the amount of mental chaos induced by financial uncertainty. A practice environment reduces the number of times a paying client must absorb the cost of your experimentation. Boundaries and scheduling rules reduce the burden of constant availability. And in my case, help me decide who I'm going to have one-to-one face-to-face conversations via video with versus who I'm going to have asymmetric text messages versus a group lesson like this. So again, the point is not the tool. The point is reducing rescue effort. That is the function of a system in the framework of this lesson that we're presenting. Not complexity, not sophistication, the reduction of heroics. And let's connect this thought back to the concept of agency. Because some people, when they hear systems, they assume they assume that the system reduces freedom. They assume that the system constrains flexibility. They assume that the system constrains optionality. People assume that systems reduce spontaneity, reduce humanity, reduce creativity, reduce judgment. But that is not what good systems do. Good systems preserve agency by reducing the mental load needed to accomplish routine things routinely. What I'm presenting in this slide, systems are at the center, and the system produces visible results like the reduction of noise, improved clarity for decision making, preserved optionality for the non-routine, creation of consistency, the protection of judgment. And that is exactly the right thing. That is exactly the right idea. The system reduces noise because fewer things need to be solved from scratch. The system improves decision because less cognitive energy is being spent on preventable confusion. A system preserves optionality because the business becomes more stable and less reactive. A system creates consistency because expectations and next steps become more visible. A system protects judgment because you are not spending your emotional, personal agency on repeated low-level rescue tasks. A system is not the enemy of freedom. A system is often the very thing that's protecting freedom. Or politically, the cultural rules, the laws of the land, the norms of the society are the things that protect people's freedom to act within the boundaries of that environment, knowing that the other people in their context are also bound by the same rules. This is one of the most important reframes of today's lesson. Because a lot of operators are resisting systems as if systems are what will make them rigid or inflexible. But in reality, the absence of systems is often the things that is making them brittle. And brittleness is not freedom. To make that point even clearer, the same operator can live in two very different businesses. Someone with the same high capacity and capabilities and talents and skills and energy. But they can create a business that is rescue dependent or that is system supported. That is the purpose of this slide. The difference in the slide is not the character, it's the structure. Imagine the same competent person in two versions of the same business. In the first version, the business is rescue heavy. Onboarding is, this is the results. Onboarding is inconsistent. Follow-up depends on that person's memory. Delivery depends on that person's adaptation. The owner burden is high because they're carrying the weight of the business. And repeatability is low because everything depends on the owner. In the second version, the business is system supported. The onboarding processes are clearer. The follow-up steps are more visible. The delivery models have more structure. These things reduce owner burden and increase repeatability of the routine things. It's the same person, it's the same intelligence, it's the same work ethic, it's the same sincerity, but for the operator, a different level of freedom. Why? Because in one case, capability is constantly compensating for missing structure. In the other case, capability is being preserved by the structure. That's the difference. This matters because many operators interpret the pressure in their business as a personal issue. They think, I need to be better. I need to work harder. I need to become more disciplined. I need to handle more. And if they're defining themselves in those should words, I would invite them to engage with Eric Lofholm and talk about the state of being and the state of becoming. Not I am or I should, some negative framework, but I am becoming the person that my business needs me to be. Because sometimes the real issue is not a character issue. It's not a character flaw. It's not even a character strength. It's a structure that the character is operating inside of. And once you start seeing this, the next decision becomes very different. So we're going to ask some questions to reveal the characteristics that your freedom depend upon. We're going to slow down. We're going to make this reflective, again, not tactical, but also not guilt-inducing. Reflective. The goal is not guilt. The goal is not shame. The goal is not admonition. The goal is recognition. Ask yourself, where is your business or nonprofit dependent on your memory? Where is your business or nonprofit depending on your improvisation? Where is your business or your nonprofit depending on your rescue effort? What symptoms repeatedly break inside your business or your nonprofit? If you disappeared for 2 weeks, what momentum would just break? What delivery of fulfillment to your client would just dissolve? These are healthy questions because they do not ask, are you a good owner? Are you hardworking enough? Do you care enough? They ask something much more useful. What does your current freedom still depend on? If the answer is your memory, your mood, your availability, your rescue behavior, your ability to keep compensated, then you have learned something important today. Not that you're failing, but the business is still more hustle dependent than system supported. If the business is dependent upon your memory, your mood, your availability, your rescue behavior, your ability to compensate, then the business is hustle dependent rather than system supported. That is the structural insight. And the structural insights are what let you see where you can begin building freedom. Because freedom comes from systems, not from hustle. As long as your business or your nonprofit depends on you hustling, and hustle, that's what I call hustle culture. That's what I call guru culture. I don't think that the guru's advice isn't valid. I don't think that the hustle culture is inherently unhealthy. It's when those things become your dependence, you become dependent on those instead of the healthy interdependence we talked about last week. So here's the mini module summarized. Choose the constraints that you're going to operate under, and specifically use those to say, this is what I do, this is who I do it for, this is how I do it. And I'm going to set aside the bright shiny objects, even though they are not inherently bad. They're just not right for my business right now. And then choose to govern those dependencies well. The relationships you establish, the systems you use to communicate those relationships, sustain those relationships, will serve you to operate freely within the bounds of the system that you have designed. Build the systems to preserve your agency. Agency with a capital A, as in my marketing agency, Vulcan Marketing in my case, or whatever you call your agency. But also personal agency of your own freedom to choose how and when to live your life. This is the curriculum, this is the scope, this is the arc. Chosen constraints, governed independence, systems that preserve your freedom. In conclusion, capability creates opportunity. Systems create freedom. And a business that is only working when the owner is continuously rescuing it is not free. Systems can preserve agency because they reduce dependence on memory, improvisation, and your emergency effort. And if you want a more personal version of today's lesson, it may simply be this. You don't create freedom by doing more. You create freedom by building systems that preserve your agency without requiring constant rescue behavior. And that's the conclusion of the independence mini module. Not remove your constraints, not do everything yourself, not hustle forever. Rather, choose your constraints. Govern the dependencies well. Build systems to protect your freedom. Create interdependence that becomes a win-win-win for each party involved. Thank you for thinking through this with me today.